Hi, everybody. Today is Friday, March 14th, 2025, and our friend Larry Johnson is back in Florida with us. Welcome back, Larry.
I am happy to be here. Dobry utro. Good morning in Russian.
Let's get started, Larry, with the negotiations between the United States and Ukrainians, which came out to be a 30-day ceasefire, which was proposed by the Trump administration to Vladimir Putin. In your opinion, what was the response of Vladimir Putin?
Yeah, they've rejected it, despite all the press reports that they've accepted it. Putin, he said, "Oh yeah, we welcome the ceasefire, but there are He used the phrase, "There are nuances." Now, I don't know if you've had a chance to read the piece that I did last night, based upon a conversation with our mutual friend Andrei Martianov. That phrase, "But there are nuances," comes from a very crude Russian joke. And I'll try to clean it up, but once you understand the joke, then you'll appreciate what Putin was saying. And the joke involves a soldier asking a general, "What is the meaning of the word nuance?" And the general said, "Well, let me show you." And so he tells the soldier, "Drop your pants and bend over." So the soldier bends over, and the general walks behind him and let's say, inserts himself into the soldier. And the general then says to the soldier, "You have a penis in your anus, and I have a penis in an anus, but that's the nuance." Now you say, "Oh, but that's the Russian joke." When they hear that phrase, that's what comes up. So what do you think the reaction to the ceasefire is? Putin politely told the United States, basically, "Go shove it." Hey, we want to talk. Yeah, we're interested in a ceasefire, but we've had conditions, and those conditions were laid out in June of 2024. And I've published them extensively at my website, sonar21.com. And the first requirement is that Ukraine has to withdraw all forces from Russian territory, and the Russians consider Zaporizhia, Kherson, Luhansk, and Donetsk as Russian territory. That's the first step. They have to renounce going into NATO. They have to stop attacking people and making it illegal to speak Russian. They're going to have a new election, because Volodymyr Zelensky is an illegal president. Those are the conditions that Putin laid out in almost a year ago now, in June of 2024. Since then, every single senior official in the Russian government has reiterated those positions. Yuri Ushakov, who's the foreign policy advisor to Putin, said, "Yeah, no, this 30-day ceasefire, no, not going to work. We got to deal with the fundamental causes of this war, which is the expansion of NATO and the use of Ukraine as a proxy to attack Russia." So, the Russians they're willing to talk. They didn't, slam the door and tell the United States, "Go screw yourself." There's no emotional outburst. And, Putin was actually very disarming. But I asked that very question. I sat with Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov on Monday, and I was with Judge Napolitano and Mario Nafal, and I asked that very specific question. Lavrov said, "Yeah, no, we haven't changed. That's our policy." So, the United States is going to have to start listening to what the Russians are saying, excuse me, and negotiate on those terms that the Russians have outlined. They're not in a weak position. And the United States is foolish. Donald Trump and his team will be very foolish if they think that they can bully or coerce Russia into accepting Western terms. But, you know, and the Ukrainians have already, you saw the very day that they announced this, they tried to launch this massive drone attack on Russia. They did send the drones, but they were I think almost all were shot down, and none of them hit a military target. And I was there when that attack took place, and frankly, I never heard an explosion. I didn't hear an air raid siren. You know, the Russians took care of business, but it was a sign of desperation on the part of Ukraine. So this then. You had Vladimir Putin the next day on Wednesday show up in Kursk wearing a military uniform. First time. We've really seen that during this entire course of the special military operation. He sent a message. We're going to finish this militarily. We'd like to have a negotiated settlement, but we're going to finish this militarily. And when he talks about Novorossiya, New Russia, Novorossiya within Russian heritage is everything along the Dnieper River, including on the left bank, and the entire Black Sea coast, which means Odessa. That's
Nikolaev.
Yes.
Larry, you've mentioned the drone attack. Who was the mastermind of the drone attack? Do you think that it was the British government pushing for that, or because they were negotiating?
Yeah. I very well could have been the Brits. I don't know. All I know is that the attack was launched from Ukrainian territory. Over 300 in different locations in Russia. Significant number, I think it's like 190 plus around Moscow, but they're all shot down. Some of the falling debris reportedly killed. I think a total of 3 people died from all of those drone attacks. And the thing to emphasize is this was terrorism, because by definition, terrorism is the use of violence against civilians or civilian targets for political purposes. So that's exactly what the Ukrainians are trying to do. But again, it doesn't achieve anything other than creating the illusion that they're somehow still capable of causing significant damage to Russia. I'll be willing to bet that you had more people die in Moscow in traffic accidents on Tuesday than you did from the drone attacks, which is a good thing. Not the death of anyone. That's not good. But I'm just, let's put it in perspective.
Laurie, here is what Vladimir Putin said, that it seems that this is one of the main concerns, is of particular importance for Russia. And here is what he said.
Is the ceasefire going to be used to continue forced mobilization, to continue rearming, to continue supplies of weaponry, to allow military units to regroup? But if nothing like this is done, then the question is bound to arise: how is control and verification going to go?
When you look at the response of Vladimir Putin, you see someone who's talking so much diplomatically. It's unbelievable the way that brutally honest, but at the same time responding to Donald Trump, rejecting, but in a very it's amazing the way that he's responding to Donald Trump. It's not offending anyone.
Well, A, he's a lawyer. B, he actually knows what he wants and what he's trying to achieve. They've really, people say, "Oh, this is just Russian reckless violence." No, no, it's not. Russia right now is not mobilized for war. The life in the streets in Moscow and in St. Petersburg, when I was there last June, you wouldn't know that there's a war going on in Ukraine, because when you go to war, you mobilize everything. You focus all economic resources on the production of weapons and material necessary to carry out the fight. Russia hasn't done that. I mean, yeah, they're having inflation because of the added production that they've undertook in the wake of starting this special military operation. But they're not going full blast as if in a war economy. If Russia decides to mobilize, then you see a difference. So Putin is, he has been trying to actually keep this conflict from expanding. And what the propaganda in the West refuses to accept is the fact that the United States provoked this. The West, NATO, provoked this. Book over my shoulder, Scott Horton's book, Provoked, it lays it out in detail that going back to the collapse of the Soviet Union and the formation of Russia as a new republic, from the outset, the Russians were looking for security guarantees from the West. And people may get sick and tired of hearing me talk about this, but the Russian people lost 27 million of their citizens in World War II. They remember that to this day. By contrast, the United States the military, both the Army Air Corps, the Navy, the Army itself, in both North Africa and European theater, in that 4 years of war, total casualties for the United States in terms of killed in action, 275,000. That's it. And the Russians, in just the Battle of Stalingrad, lost 900,000 troops in one battle. The judge and I had lunch with a group of 4 Russian gentlemen, Professor Dugin, Konstantin Malofiev, and the dean of Konstantin's school that he set up. And I asked the question, I said, how many of you, these 4 men, how many of you had family members that died in World War II? Everybody raised a hand. Everyone at that table. I turned around and said, hey, Judge, did you lose any family members in World War II? Judge, nope. Neither in my case. That's the difference. So for the Russians, when they see the West coming after them and rejecting, not only rejecting Russian requests to become part of NATO, and to request that NATO not expand to these, to the Baltic states, which it did, to Poland, to Romania, which it did, to Hungary. The Russians only had to assume that the West was trying to overthrow it, which it was. I mean, we try to pretend that, the United States is just minding its own business, and these Russians, these crazy Russians, just woke up and decided to be bad. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So, Putin, he's serious about this. This is about the survival of Russia, because the United States, from its policy standpoint, from its, let's call it the deep state intent, is to destroy Russia. Let there be no doubt about that. And that's what Russia is going to prevent. They're going to stop it. They stopped Napoleon in 1812. They stopped Hitler and ended that in 1945. Huh?
They stopped Brits, yeah.
And then, well, the Brits came in Crimea in 1854, I believe it was. Russia lost that one. It was ultimately negotiated settlement, and there was no further invasion into Russian territory itself. But still, Russia's been repeatedly attacked. Russia did not launch an attack on Germany. It was the other way around. Russia did not invade China. It was, going back to Genghis Khan, that the Mongols coming out of the south invaded Russia. So Russia has a long history of fighting off foreign invaders. And, the West, instead of taking steps to reassure them that, hey, we're going to live in peace, we're always gearing up for war in the West. So that's, you're right, Putin was calm, but he's resolute, he's firm, and very, very serious about this.
What's so confusing about the way that Donald Trump is dealing with Ukraine is that right after the meeting between Americans and Ukrainians, they're talking about ceasefire. And if you want to negotiate with Russians on ceasefire, why do you need to resume sending arms and intelligence to Ukraine again?
Yeah, it's stupid. I mean, it's fundamentally stupid, because it's not going to change. It's not going to change Ukraine's ability to carry out offensive operations. It's just going to encourage them to continue doing so, but they're not going to win. This war is lost to Ukraine militarily. It's just a matter, it's going to take a while to finish it off. One of the reasons the Russians move slowly is to minimize casualties. I heard that directly from retired General Buzinski. That's why they're not going to do any kind of mass assaults and put large number of troops at risk. So they are acting with caution. They're under no pressure time-wise. Here's the mistake I think Trump is making, and it may be in part because of what's coming in from the intelligence community. Still, that they believe that Russia suffered massive casualties, which they have not, and that Russia's economy is teetering on the brink, that if we just put a little more pressure, they're going to crack and break. That is those are false assumptions. But if you believe those, and that's how you act, the United States is going to put itself into potential peril. This could very well become Donald Trump's war, and he'll lose it. He'll be a loser. Doesn't like being a loser, but he'll be a loser. And the American people in the world, in fact, will be losers if they, don't stop this madness, the feeling that we've got to conquer and control every damn country out there. We need to mind our own business, keep our hands to ourselves. But the United States so far has been incapable of doing that.
Actually, we've heard the U.S. Treasury Secretary saying that he's prepared to put devastating sanctions on Russia.
Yeah, Bessent's a smart guy for money, but he doesn't understand Russia. He doesn't. The Russians. That's why they're setting up an alternative to the U.S. dollar. That's why BRICS is doing what BRICS is doing. They recognize they can no longer afford to be dependent on the Western financial system. So they've been creating alternatives for the last 3 years. So this is, we're now starting into the fourth year. And, go ahead, put those sanctions on. They usually, if they work like the others did, it's going to be blowback. It'll be more damaging actually to Europe, because it will increase the price of oil, and the price of oil goes up, and Russia's going to make more money because they're not going to go out and be held hostage by the United States. The United States can no longer hold Russia hostage. There was a time when we could, but that time's passed.
Larry, during the talk that you had with Sergei Lavrov, which I watched it's an hour and a half, and he said when he mentioned the relationship between Russia and China, he was just mentioning that to compare that with that one with the United States. Here is, you see Donald Trump while trying to negotiate with Russia, you see the U.S. Treasury Secretary putting sanctions, sending more weapons to Ukraine and intelligence to Ukraine. This is not the way that Russia and China are getting along with each other.
Well, they've, I asked that question of Lavrov, and he pointed out that, you go back in history, Russia and China have not always had friendly relations. And there are times that they were at odds. Even during the height of the Cold War, where we talked about the threat of international communism, Communist China and Communist Soviet Union were not friends. They weren't buddies. At times they worked against each other. So the development of the relationship over the last 3 years in the course of the special military operation have strengthened those ties. And, Lavrov pointed out, he says, look, China has its issues. Russia has its issues. And he said, we don't always agree. But we do agree on one thing, that we are going to talk to each other and we're going to treat each other with respect. And Lavrov, it was sort of funny. He noted, look, the Chinese, they got their own time horizon, which is, way out there in the future. They think about things in a way that we Russians don't. He was acknowledging some of the cultural differences. But, I'd raise this because there are people in, not just in the Trump administration, but in the whole foreign policy establishment in Washington, the deep state, that are convinced that what we have to do is split Russia off from China, because Russia really doesn't want to be friends with China. How could they? They seriously believe that we can develop a relationship with Russia that will lead the Russians to say, yeah, I hate those Chinese too. I don't want to hang with them anymore. I mean, it's crazy. The United States is like an abusive spouse or like a goddamn wife beater. So we're constantly clubbing Russia, and then we want Russia to come be our sweetheart and go with us so we can go against China. It's not going to happen. China and Russia have, they've come to the realization the West is dangerous. It's not China and Russia that have military bases scattered around the world. It's the United States. It's not China and Russia that are talking about attacking the United States. It's the United States talking about attacking China. You've had senior military officials in public say, now we're going to be at war with China by the end of 2025. Chinese are listening to this. The story that most people have missed, though, is the West saying, okay, we've got to produce more weapons. We've got artillery shells. Well, one of the critical ingredients that you need to create those artillery shells, antimony. China and Russia, I think, control something like 90% of global production of antimony. China has already cut it off to the United States, and probably cut it off to India, because India is talking about manufacturing, stepping up its war production so it could send material to Ukraine. And China and Russia are saying, no, we'll cut them off. So this relationship between China and Russia is new, but it didn't just start 3 years ago, because remember, they are conducting right now as we talk, China and Russia are conducting a joint military naval exercise with Iran. And that started 5 years ago. So Russia and China had already begun the process of, synchronizing their systems. There are, the oil and gas that Russia provides, China needs, and there are some things that China can produce that Russia can use, but Russia's not independent. They don't need China for food or energy or even rare earth minerals, because Russia has its own supply.
Larry, how about the timing of this joint military, I don't know, operation, exercise together with Iran?
Yeah.
What is all for? How do you see the main reason of that? Did they do that before planning it and right now doing it? What was that?
No. Look, they started this 5 years ago, I believe, and they've done it at the same time every year. Around the first week of March, and these kinds of exercises, it's important to understand. The planning for them usually starts at least 12 to 18 months prior. So, for example, the exercise that was being conducted now, March of 2025, the planning for that probably started in September or October of 2023. Okay, so they're not reacting to immediate world events now. This started 16, 18 months ago. And right now, there's planning underway for next year's exercise in March of 2026. And probably by September, they will start the planning for the exercise in 2027. That's how these things are done. I spent, good Lord, almost 23 years scripting these exercises for the military, and saw how this planning process works, and everything that goes into developing and executing one of these exercises.
Larry, here is Mike Waltz, Trump's national security advisor to Fox News, in terms of the negotiations between the United States and Russia.
Announce or negotiate anything on national television, certainly not ahead of the president. But we do have some cautious optimism. You saw the Ukrainians move from where we were in the Oval Office to where we were in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, with Secretary of State Rubio. And you saw President Putin's press conference today. Of course, both sides are going to have their demands, and of course, both sides are going to have to make some compromises. And the shuttle diplomacy of going back and forth is happening. I've spoken to my counterpart, Special Envoy Witkoff is out there, and Bray waiting for the President Trump to make decisions on next steps.
Russia's not going to make compromises. Russia doesn't need to make compromises. Russia is not losing the war. Ukraine is. Russia's going to dictate the terms. I mean, and the Waltz believes that nonsense is troublesome, but it's, you can't, you try to explain it to them. The United States, we think we don't hold any cards. We think we do. Trump was correct telling Zelensky, you don't have the cards. Yeah, true. And Trump, neither do you. Your name may be Trump, but you don't have a Trump card.
And you saw when they came out with the idea of ceasefire, they all said Marco Rubio to get Kaja Kallas, and you see Ursula von der Leyen, Emmanuel Macron. The ball is now in Russia's court.
Yeah. You don't mean Ursula von der Leyen. You mean Ursula von der Leyen. Sorry. Can't pass up that opportunity.
Where is the ball right now, Larry?
It is back in the U.S. court. They didn't pay attention. They came out and said, "Oh yeah, we got all these great agreements with Ukraine in Jeddah." And this, I thought it was in Riyadh, but in Jeddah. And then, like within 2 or 3 hours, Volodymyr Zelensky gives a press conference where he basically rejected everything that they agreed on. Look, this is going to be settled on the battlefield, and the fact of the matter is Europe is weak and incapable of shifting the war against Russia. All they'll do is run the risk of expanding the war if they decide to send troops. They're going to send troops, they're going to get killed. Putin, they're out saying that Donald Trump has asked Vladimir Putin, "Oh, don't kill the Ukrainians in Kursk." Putin sat with General Gerasimov on Wednesday, I believe, and dressed in a military uniform. First time since started special military operation. Again, projecting, "Hey, I'm the commander in chief here," and directed him, "Kill the mercenaries. They do not have protection of Geneva Convention. Wipe them out." So the Ukrainians' choice is they're going to die, or the Ukrainian troops can surrender, or they can try to escape and get out of Kursk. But this operation is now dramatically shifted against them, and Trump's pleas to save their lives, Russia's not listening. They've lost. Russia's probably lost, killed in action over 100,000, maybe 120,000. That's nothing compared. I mean, it's a tenth of what Ukraine has lost, but it's still a significant number. And the point has been made by a friend of mine that you go back and look at how many casualties the Russians suffered when they were in Afghanistan. I think total deaths there were like 18,000. And what happened back then? This was in Soviet times. The Russian people came out and they were protesting that war. They were in the streets protesting it. They did not have support at home. You're not seeing that now in Russia, just the opposite. The widespread support, because they recognize this is a existential threat to Russia.
One of the points, Larry, that Putin mentioned is we have to consider the reality on the ground, that Russian army is advancing almost on all fronts. And on the other hand, the situation in the Kursk region, he was mentioning, what do we do with the Ukrainian forces in the Kursk region? Are we going to let them go? How do you see? Are they going to die there? Are they going to be surrendered?
If they're a foreign mercenary, they're being executed. They're just as they're being treated as spies behind enemy lines. They don't get to be treated in accordance with the Geneva Convention, because these are not Ukrainian soldiers. So they're lining them up and shooting them in place. Ukrainian soldiers will be given the opportunity to surrender, and those that have committed crimes are going to be tried. Some of the trials have already taken place. So that's why they're trying to escape back into Sumy. And frankly, I think Russia has already started moving its forces into Sumy. They're going to create another buffer zone. So the Russian general staff that's guiding this war effort, they're not keeping an eye on the political negotiations to say, "Oh, do we have to stop fighting?" There will not be a temporary ceasefire, and there won't be one. If a ceasefire comes to pass, it's going to be based upon the position Russia outlined in June of 2024. And I would be very surprised that Russia makes, quote, compromises. Because frankly, if Putin agrees to any of these Western demands, he could very well be removed from office. That, I think there would be, there's already elements in Russia that view him as too soft, that he's, not been tough enough with the West. So you don't have a majority of Russians saying, "Oh, stop being mean to the West. Let's be nice. Let's allow them to come rape our daughters." No, you don't have that going on.
Larry, how do they feel about Odessa? I don't believe that they would let Odessa in the hands of Ukrainian the way it is right now.
Yeah,
And we know that the British government seems that they're managing the situation in Odessa.
Yeah, no, Russia will ultimately take Odessa back. I don't know if it'll be this year or next year. They're going to take it back. It's not going to remain in the hands of Ukraine or in the hands of the Brits, for that matter.
Larry, do you think that the British government, I know that Donald Trump is not, at least the United States under Donald Trump is not interested in staying in Ukraine and being involved in what's going on in Ukraine, but how they can withdraw the British government, the British forces from Ukraine, that would be hugely difficult, in my opinion.
What do you mean? I'm not aware.
The British is so much involved in Ukraine in terms of their politics, their system, their forces, their intelligence. They're just in every way they're involved in Ukraine.
Well, the UK, let's say they're verbally committed. Their financial commitment is limited just by virtue of the size of what the UK is. But they are definitely taking the lead. They're wanting, the Brits recognize their only hope is to figure out how to get the United States involved in this war effort directly against Russia. That's what they're trying to do. The UK is it's a hollow shell of what it used to be. There was a time where you go back prior to World War I, you could make the case that the United Kingdom, England, was still a powerful global force in the world. World War I ended that. World War II further destroyed its empire, which Churchill was definitely, desperately trying to salvage. And they got humiliated in the Suez Canal crisis in 1954, I think it was, where both Britain and France conspired with Israel to try to take control of the Suez Canal and got beat back. So, here we have the UK and Keir Starmer remind me of a child that's playing dress up. Hey, I'm a fireman. Hey, I'm a policeman. They put on a costume, parade around. They talk like, they act it out. But in terms of actually being able to accomplish something, the British Army is 70,000 total. I mean, that wouldn't even fill any football stadium at the major level in Brazil. There'll still be tickets available. And they want to take on Russia. Russia's army is 1.5 million right now and growing. So Britain's just a speck, like a piece of dirt on a napkin. You just flick it off. So yeah, but they're going to do everything they can to try to exacerbate the conflict, keep it going. But they're facing their own economic problems at home, and if people like Tom Luongo and Alex Craner are correct, that those chickens are going to come home to roost pretty soon, and then we'll see a financial collapse of the UK.
There was an article in the Financial Times in which the Polish Foreign Minister Sikorski is asking the United States to put nuclear weapons in Poland. Mm-hmm. Here is what J.D. Vance said in his latest interview on Fox News. Larry.
President about that particular issue, but I would be shocked if he was supportive of nuclear weapons extending further east into Europe. We have got to be careful, Laura. We are playing literally with the lives of the future of human civilization. This is one of the most important reasons why President Trump sees himself and in fact is a peace president. You have people like Joe Biden sleepily walking us into a nuclear conflict. Donald Trump is taking us in a totally different approach, and we need it. We need cooler heads to prevail. And on this Russia-Ukraine thing, Laura, I mean, look, the Biden administration strategy was literally to shovel weapons at the Ukrainians, allow the Russians and the Ukrainians to bleed out, and hope that somehow a settlement appeared out of thin air. Donald Trump is engaging in tough diplomacy and enlisting his entire administration to find out, what do the Ukrainians want? What do they need? What do the Russians want? What do they need? Because the war is stupid. It would have never started if he had been president, and it continuing is not in the interest of anybody.
Yeah. Your take, Larry.
Well, if Poland, if the United States is foolish enough to put nuclear weapons on Poland, there would be nuclear weapons in Poland, but they'd be coming from the Russian side. Russia's not going to allow that. And, you know, right now Russia has the advantage with the intermediate nuclear missile, the Oreshnik. It has an intermediate range ballistic missile that can hit anywhere in Europe, including the UK, and they don't have anything to counter it, and nor does the United States. You know, I am getting a little tired of this. Oh, Trump had been president, this wouldn't have started. Well, you know, if I was born as a Rockefeller, I'd be wealthy. Okay, so let's stop looking in the past about things that we can't change the past. Here we are right now. Trump can change this today. Tell Ukraine, the intelligence is now cut off. You're not going to continue this war. You're going to stop. You're going to surrender. You're going to withdraw from Russian territory. And you're going to hold elections. We're not going to continue to fund and enable a group of Nazis. But that's not what Trump's doing. So he's still enabling the war to go forward. So he can talk about, oh, it's a terrible thing, we need to stop it, like as if this was just some dispute between two kids fighting over who gets to have the baseball glove. No, Ukraine has been used by the West as a proxy to attack and destroy Russia. That is still the objective. And that's what, you know, I've tried to communicate to the people I know in Russia. I wouldn't trust the United States at all in these negotiations. I don't want to hear words, show the action. Cut off the support for Ukraine now. Otherwise, you're an enabler of them attacking us. You know, there's no gray area here. It's black and white.
One of the issues that the Europeans are pointing out and putting a lot of pressure, at least talking about it, on Donald Trump and his administration is the security guarantee for Ukraine. Do they remember that this war started because the West rejected to give security guarantee to Russia? That's why this war started, that they have to go in that direction instead of talking about security guarantee to Ukraine. Ukraine can be neutral as Austria.
Russia would prefer that it not have to worry about what NATO's doing on its borders, but it does. And NATO, instead of backing off, is trying to expand. They're trying to build a bigger base in Romania, the largest base. They still conduct these annual military exercises, which feature Russia as the enemy that needs to be attacked. You know, if the situation was flipped and Russia and China were conducting annual military exercises with Mexico and Canada or with other countries in South America, the United States wouldn't put up with it for a minute. We'd see that as a threat, and it would be a legitimate threat. But when it comes to Russia, they're just crazy for getting worried about that. And Putin, with the start of the special military operation, as they say in Spanish, basta, enough.
By the way, in Portuguese, we say the same way. Basta.
Oh, basta, basta. Okay, there we go. Portuguese, Spanish, enough. No more. And that's why the special military operation's underway. Russia's not going to stop it until it secures solid guarantees about security. And that means the end of military exercises on its borders. That means an end to these military bases that are now in Poland and Romania. I think ultimately that's where this is headed. They're not going to trust just another promise written on paper. No. Let's see those bases. We got to see those being dismantled, taken apart.
Laurie, we had Tulsi Gabbard wanted to work with Colonel Daniel Davis.
Yeah.
Who was on our podcast here, who is our friend, and he has his own podcast on YouTube. What was the issue with Daniel Davis? What did they decide to do that to him?
The Zionists, the Israeli lobby, went after him because he has been critical of the Netanyahu government, and he's allowed people like me and others, Doug McGregor, to go on the program and to say things that are not well received in Israel in particular, but also by the Ukrainians. So they've targeted him, and they've he was slated to be the number 3 guy in the Directorate of National Intelligence. And I think he would have been very, very good in that position. But, and I spoke with him last night, and I said, look at there is a silver lining to this. While it's disappointing that, the nomination was pulled, the reason they're going after him is because he's effective. Now, you're fortunate you live in Brazil. They're, you're a little bit more out of reach. So they'd be going after you too because you're effective. And so I said, reminded him. I said, look, if nobody is listening to you, if what you were saying and broadcasting, that nobody's paying attention to it, they wouldn't care. They'd ignore you. You'd be just like a fly in a large conference room, just something a little annoying, but nothing to worry about. They're worried about you. And Mother Jones, there's this despicable reporter by the name of David Korn, he's writing a hit piece on Davis and going and attacking both myself and Doug McGregor as part of the attack on Davis. He contacted Danny Davis with a series of questions, and and some of them were about what a bad guy I am, and Korn likes to say, "Oh, Larry Johnson's a conspiracy theorist." 7 years ago, when Russiagate started, I was writing at the time that this was a CIA FBI operation directed out of the Clinton campaign. And David Korn said, "Oh, that's a conspiracy theory." In fact, David Korn put out the Steele dossier. He's the conspiracy theorist, but he's under the control, in my view, of the Zionist lobby. And so this is an orchestrated hit piece on Danny Davis, but I think it's ultimately going to make him stronger because he will be able to talk more freely now. If he was once he took that job, he was going to have to shut down his podcast, which is is not as big as and popular as yours, but it's still, he's got a significant number of people watching. So it's unfortunate, but that's, that's the nature. Unfortunately, Washington is has under the control of the Zionist lobby, and we're seeing that, in terms of the attacks on these students at Columbia University, and the attack on free speech, the attack on the First Amendment that the Trump administration is so happily embracing, and so many Democrats too. It's disgusting.
Laurie, even when it comes to the U.S. envoy to the conflict to the negotiations between the United States and Hamas, I don't know if you've learned that the U.S. envoy was removed from his position because he said some nice words about Hamas forces that he was negotiating with them.
Oh, yeah, I hadn't heard. So he has been removed?
He was removed because he said, these are nice boys, nice guys that I'm talking with.
Yeah.
It's so amazing how powerful this lobby is in the United States.
That's pernicious. Yeah, it's evil. It really is. It's evil. And what they're going to end up doing is helping destroy Donald Trump's presidency and destroy Israel in the process. That's the real irony. Their entire, reason for being, the raison d'etre is to protect and preserve Israel, and yet their very actions and their suppression of Palestinian rights, it's ultimately going to lead to their destruction. It's very Hegelian, and it is. But there'll be a lot of people damaged and hurt in the process. And like this, they removed the other negotiator. Okay, go. Israel labors under the false belief that it has unlimited military capability. It does not. It's dependent upon a reservists, and those reservists have other lives. And when they're now called off into military duty, their ability to economically produce for society goes away, and then it imposes an additional cost on Israel as a nation. And so now, instead of confining themselves to a limited mission, they keep expanding the mission. They got to have troops now to control parts of Syria. And then they're trying to control the border with Lebanon. And then they've got the West Bank operations. And then they're still involved with Gaza. Hey, they don't have unlimited resources. And even if support from the United States is not going to be sufficient to allow them to cope with that.
And before Donald Trump coming to power, he could manage the ceasefire between Gazans and between Palestinians and Israel. It seems that as time goes by, the situation is getting worse because Houthis, they were just stopping attack. They stopped attacking Israel. Right now, they're back. They're going to fight Israel. Hezbollah is back. The situation with Iran, I don't see the way that Donald Trump is trying to deal with. It's not constructive. It's not helping the process of negotiation between the United States and Iran. And we've heard from Iranian Supreme Court, from the president of Iran, the new president, who was willing so much to talk with the United States. They're saying, if they want to behave this way toward us, we're not going to negotiate with them.
Yeah. No, again, the United States think it can bully Iran, and the sanctions have definitely hurt Iran. But what it has done is, deepened the relationship between Iran and Russia, and Iran and China. So, they're going to find an alternative path that doesn't involve the West. Europe is now irrelevant. There was a time when Europe was relevant. Now, all they are, they're like a drug addict, man. They got to have that fix of oil and gas. They'll sell their children to get it. The United States is, we're still a powerful nation, at least on paper. We're wealthy, but a lot of it's paper wealth. We still enjoy. We have some great resources still in this country, but there've been a lot of government restrictions to prevent from mining them or accessing them. We're overextended militarily, and we still think, that we haven't won a war since the end of World War II, and yet we've got all 700 plus military bases and all these expensive weapons systems, and a budget that's approaching $1 trillion, and accomplishing what? Right now, we can't even produce enough missiles or rockets to keep the Ukrainians supplied. Can't do it. And even if we sit down and say, well, this is going to be our priority, we don't have the manufacturing capability. We could recover that. But, in the midst of all this, you got Trump going off with tariffs, getting into an economic war with our three top trading partners, China, Canada, Mexico. I think it's going to turn out to be real negative economically.
Larry, you've mentioned that the United States is overstretched or overextended militarily.
Mm-hmm.
The way that Donald Trump is talking about the Golden Dome, don't you think that he's trying to negotiate with the military-industrial complex instead of starting a new war or continuing the conflicts outside of the United States? The focus should be in the United States and making something in the United States instead of going and fighting outside of the United States and making chaos. How do you see that? Because that doesn't make sense to me, Golden Dome for the United States.
Well, it's back to the future. So I don't know. You were probably in college back in 2000, 2001, or were you just coming out of high school? You're a kid.
High school.
Yeah. So back then, George W. Bush, when he came into office, they're talking about, and this went back to Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative, SDI, and we were going to build this ballistic missile defense system, which is one of the reasons that in the 2001, George W. Bush told the Russians, "Take your anti-ballistic missile treaty and shove it. We're not going to follow it anymore. We're walking away." Then 9/11 happened, and the United States got completely distracted with its new war on terrorism and ignored doing anything with creating anti-ballistic missile defense systems. Well, Russia said, okay. And Russia went and began building such systems. And that's why they have, the S-400, the S-500, the S-550. They've got very advanced missile defense systems that are quite effective. The United States doesn't. So here's now Trump resurfacing what they tried to do 20 years ago and failed. And, Trump, he's saying on the one hand, he wants to see if he can negotiate nuclear deal, nuclear control with Russia and China. Yeah, candidly, if I'm Russia and the United States can't even compete anymore with intermediate range ballistic missiles. U.S. doesn't have anything really comparable to what Russia has. Russia's in a dominant position on that front. But the United States has failed to deploy any sizable number of hypersonic missiles that can operate, whereas Russia has 4 or 5 different varieties. China's got some. So the United States is lagging behind in terms of key technologies. And then when we talked about some of the key rare earth minerals like antimony, China and Russia are withholding those, and the United States isn't going to be able to produce the weapons that require that material. So it's just, it's not a rosy outlook. And the fundamental problem for the United States is it lacks a strategy. What is it we're trying to do? What kind of military do you want? Do we want a military that is set up to be an expeditionary force that will send around the world to conquer other countries? Okay, that requires certain, certain systems and resources in place. Are we actually set up to defend and protect our nation, our borders? That's what Russia is. Russia's army, Russia is guided by a national defense strategy to defend the nation, not to be a military that projects force around the world. Whereas the United States set itself up basically to be one to project force around the world, but we're not sure what we're trying to do. And we've now depended upon aircraft carriers, which are now completely vulnerable to hypersonic missiles. They have to pull the carriers out of the Red Sea to keep, or else the Houthis will take them out. So the United States it's a state of confusion, and it doesn't help. Trump, unfortunately, instead of standing up and providing a clear vision of, okay, here's what we're trying to do, here's where we're going. We got the best military in the world. No, we got the most expensive military in the world, but it ain't the best.
Larry, we had a meeting between Donald Trump and NATO Secretary General in the United States on the same day that we had Witkoff talking with Putin.
Yeah.
And what was that all about? What is the process of negotiations between NATO on one part and the United States on the other part? I'm talking about Europeans talking to Donald Trump and his administration. What do they want to achieve? What is the internal dynamic between the two parties?
Well, Trump is definitely not pro-NATO. And in fact, you're watching him sitting there with Rudy Tooty or Mark Rutte, but we call him Tutti Frutti. Rutte's sitting there listening to Trump basically talking about taking over Greenland, which is territory claimed by Denmark, who's also a member of NATO. So instead of Rutte sitting there saying, "Oh, wait a second, we can't have NATO countries fighting," he's going, "Oh yeah, Trump, that's probably a good idea. Yeah, you got some legitimate security concerns." I am, this notion that we're going to make America great again by conquering other territory, by being an imperial power, is dangerous and stupid. And to try to take control of Greenland, and then talking about, there are even reports that they've directed Southern Command, to develop plans for another military invasion of Panama to take control of the canal. I mean, good God. That's not what most Americans voted for. If Trump goes down, if he really, I think Trump's going to destroy his presidency and maybe destroy America in the process. Who knows? Not that the Democrats are any great alternative at all, but it's almost like we've got a death wish in this country.
It seems that he had somehow a good influence on the NATO Secretary General. Here is what he said, Larry, right after that meeting.
General of NATO, you ran a European country. Would you be willing to do business again with Russia after this? Because we are hearing reports of things like maybe gas deals come back into play.
Well, I mean, I'm not there because, first of all, you have to maintain the pressure on the Russians to make sure that they do whatever is necessary. That's why we have the sanctions, and let's not be naive about the Russians. But longer term, Russia is there. I mean, Russia will not go away. And I've had many dealings with President Putin till 2014. In my first 4 years as Prime Minister, we had many negotiations. And I think it is normal, if the war would have stopped, for Europe to somehow, step by step, and also for the US, step by step, to restore normal relations with the Russians. But we are absolutely not there yet. We have to maintain the pressure on them to make sure that they are willing to engage seriously in talks with the American administration and, of course, also with the Ukrainians.
It feels so good that they're somehow changing the rhetoric.
Well, it's like the captain of the Titanic as it's sinking. He's saying, a lifeboat may be a pretty good idea. we need to start looking into the possibility of using lifeboats. Look, NATO's coming apart. Europe is weak, and he's at least now starting to recognize Russia's going to win this thing, and we're going to have to. If we want to survive, we got to deal with Russia. Russia's not going to invade the rest of Europe. That is just a canard that's been put up. But Russia's going to make sure that Europe does not pose a threat to it, that it stays out of Russian affairs. Leave Russia alone. That's sort of the, Russia wants to be left alone. Russia would like to just deal with other countries as friends. They're not pushing, the days where we claimed that Russia was out to sow international communism and take over the world. That was a lie too. That was a big lie from the Cold War. But Russia right now looks for normal relations with other countries, and one that's not designed to exploit them, rape them, but treat them as equals. And that's something the United States doesn't understand. This the Christian aspect of Russia's character is very important, and it's one that's not widely understood in the West.
Seems that Russia is concerned about Ukraine turning into a new Idlib. What Idlib was for Bashar al-Assad, and how they were just acting against the government. It seems that there is somehow possibility of turning Ukraine into a new Idlib if the Europeans continue this sort of enmity toward Russia.
Yeah, no, it's Ukraine won't get there. I mean, Ukraine's going to be defeated. It's going to get to the place where it's not going to be able to sustain military operations and keep its economy is going to be a complete wreck. Europe doesn't have the deep pockets to come in and salvage it. It's not like things are going really swell in Germany and France and the UK with the economy. They're all staggering. And instead of fixing their own problems at home, they're trying to waste more money in Ukraine. I say go for it. It'll bring about their destruction much quicker.
Laurie, the government, those people who are going to run Ukraine in the aftermath of a Ukrainian settlement, how much Russia is concerned about that?
Well, Russia's going to have a say, just as the United States had a say after we defeated Japan, just as the United States had a say with the government that ultimately came to power in West Germany. Russia's going to have a say. They're going to insist that all this Bandera Nazi stuff is, expunged from the Constitution and from the country. That can't be allowed to continue to exist. It is a pernicious ideology, and it's one that's basically helped bring about this destructive war.
Thank you so much, Larry, for being with us today.
All right.
Welcome back to Florida.
Yeah, hey, got the Florida shirt back on.
Yeah,
didn't have the Florida shirt in Russia.
We've missed your shirt.
Well, I'll see you on Monday.
Yeah, see you on Monday, Larry.
All right, my friend.
Bye-bye. Take care. Bye-bye.